เอาละครับวันนี้เราจะมาพูดถึงกระบวนการผลิตและการออกแบบเครื่องแต่งกายหลังจากที่เรียนไปหลายครั้งละเราจะมาร่วมกันทำโปรเจกต์เพื่อที่จะนำเสนอการออกแบบการแต่งกายเพื่อการแสดงเพื่อการละครนะแต่ก่อนอื่นเรามาพูดในเรื่องของการกระบวนการออกแบบก่อนนะลูกนะก็ครูก็จะตั้งเป็นข้อสังเกตให้พวกเราได้ลองไปจดจำและใช้กันนะครับคือขั้นตอนในกระบวนการออกแบบเครื่องแต่งกายเนี่ยมันก็มีหลายขั้นตอนด้วยกันนะซึ่งในหลักการพื้นฐานเนี่ยมันก็จะเป็นประมาณเดียวกันก็คือ1จะเริ่มต้นจากการวิเคราะห์ก่อนนะขั้นตอนแรกคือการวิเคราะห์บทประพันธ์บทละครบางทีเนี่ยเราเอาบทละครบทมาอ่านเพื่อที่จะดูว่ากรอบแนวคิดทั้งหมดของละครเป็นอย่างไรมีตัวละครอะไรบ้างจะต้องทำเสื้อผ้าคอสตูมเป็นอย่างไรยุคสมัยไหนสถานะตัวละครเป็นอย่างไรบางคนนะครับที่เป็นนักออกแบบต้องถึงขั้นไปซื้อบทประพันธ์ที่เป็นบทวรรณกรรมต้นฉบับมาอ่านเพื่อทำความเข้าใจนะฮะแต่ถ้าไม่มีเวลาที่จะอ่านบทประพันธ์เราอ่านจากบทละครก็ได้หรือเกิดจากการประชุมงานร่วมกันก็ได้นะฮะขั้นตอนแรกเนี่ยคือการวิเคราะห์บทประพันธ์นะฮะว่าบทประพันธ์เป็นอย่างไรนะพารามิเตอร์เครื่องแต่งกายสำหรับการแสดงก็จะถูกกำหนดขึ้นนะฮะว่าพล็อตเรื่องคร่าวๆเป็นอย่างไรโครงเรื่องเป็นอย่างไรการแต่งกายก็จะแสดงให้เห็นว่าตัวละครนั้นในฉากนี้เนี่ยเป็นอย่างไรเมื่อนักแสดงเปลี่ยนไปในแต่ละฉากเครื่องแต่งกายก็จะเปลี่ยนเป็นอย่างไรบ้างแล้วก็ดูตามเซตตามซีนต่างๆถูกไหมฮะถัดมาหลังจากการวิเคราะห์แล้วตีความแล้วการทำงานร่วมกันในการออกแบบขั้นตอนสำคัญในกระบวนการที่นักออกแบบทุกคนเนี่ยจะต้องพบกับทีมงานผู้อำนวยการสร้างสตาฟทุกๆฝ่ายเราจะต้องมีความเข้าใจร่วมกัน direction ของโชว์ direction ของการแสดงจะต้องเข้าใจ direction ในทิศทางเดียวกันว่าเรามุ่งหน้าไปในทิศทางใดนักออกแบบจะต้องเข้าร่วมการประชุมนะเข้าใจการทำงานทีมทุกอย่างนะก็คือต้องประชุมร่วมกันถัดมาเราจะต้องวิเคราะห์วิจัยเครื่องแต่งกายเมื่อผู้กำกับและนักออกแบบเนี่ยอยู่ในหน้าที่เดียวกันขั้นตอนต่อไปก็คือนักออกแบบเครื่องแต่งกายจะต้องรวบรวมงานทั้งหมดนะมาวิเคราะห์วิจารณ์วิจัยนะนักออกแบบเครื่องแต่งกายมักจะเริ่มต้นด้วยโลกแห่งการจินตนาการก่อนนะเราได้ประชุมอะไรมาคร่าวๆแล้วก็จินตนาการว่าเฮ้ยเราจะต้องออกแบบอย่างไรให้มันเหมาะสมนะอาจจะมีการเสนอแนวคิดหรือใส่ลายเซ็นของนักออกแบบไปว่าเฮ้ยถึงแม้ว่าจะเป็นละครที่เคยมีคนทำมาแล้วในยุคนี้สมัยนี้แต่เราอาจจะใส่ลายเซ็นหรือจินตนาการหรือแนวทางของคนทำเหมือนพจมานบ้านสายทองทำมาไม่รู้กี่รอบนะแต่คอสตูมก็ต้องมีการออกแบบที่แตกต่างกันเปลี่ยนไปไหมการร่างเบื้องต้นเมื่อได้รับข้อมูลเพียงพอแล้วนักออกแบบเนี่ยก็จะต้องคือก่อนหน้านี้ต้องไปสืบเสาะหาข้อมูลอันหนึ่งนะทำความเข้าใจบทประพันธ์2เนี่ยประชุมงานร่วมกัน3ไปหาข้อมูลนะเชิงลึกเกี่ยวกับประวัติภูมิหลังยุคสมัยที่เราจะทำไปหาข้อมูลทำรีเสิร์ชนะแล้วก็เริ่มมาเขียนโครงร่างอย่างง่ายๆนะโดยการสเก็ตภาพคร่าวๆอย่างรวดเร็วให้ผู้ออกแบบได้เห็นแนวคิดพื้นฐานว่าเฮ้ยมันจะออกมาเป็นประมาณไหนหลังจากนั้นในระหว่างทำสเก็ตก็อาจจะไปหาดีเทลรายละเอียด reference ต่างๆมาประกอบด้วยนะคะเพราะว่าการสเก็ตภาพออกมาให้เห็นภาพคร่าวๆเนี่ยมันจะเป็นการทำให้เรานั้นและทีมงานได้เข้าใจภาพร่วมกันสุดท้ายเนี่ยภาพร่างสุดท้ายเมื่อนักออกแบบเครื่องแต่งกายและผู้กำกับเห็นด้วยกับสิ่งที่เราสเก็ตไอเดียและทุกคนเก็ตไอเดียแล้วเนี่ยก็จะถูกนำมาสร้างเป็นภาพร่างสุดท้ายนะเรียกว่าการเรนเดอร์หรือมักจะทำด้วยการเอาผ้าตัวอย่างมาแปะมาทาสีภาพร่างสุดท้ายให้เห็นชัดเจนว่ามันจะเป็นประมาณนี้แล้วหลังจากนั้นก็จะเข้าสู่กระบวนการผลิตนะลูกนะเมื่อการออกแบบการแสดงเนี่ยการออกแบบเครื่องแต่งกายการแสดงมันผ่านแล้วมันพรูฟแล้วเราก็จะต้องมาผลิตนะฮะซึ่งอาจจะมีการผลิตใหม่อาจจะมีการเช่าอาจจะมีการซื้ออาจจะมีการสร้างอาจจะมีการสั่งทำก็สุดแล้วแต่โปรดักชันมี2วิธีที่สามารถเริ่มสร้างเสื้อผ้าได้ทั้งแบบร่างหรือหลายๆแบบนะฮะก็คือจะใช้วิธีสร้างแพทเทิร์นทำชุดขึ้นมาใหม่นะฮะ หรือไม่ว่าจะเป็นการเช่าการหยิบยืมการซื้อมานะก็ผลิตออกมาเป็นเสื้อผ้าเครื่องแต่งกายนั่นเองอันนี้ครูจิ๊บพูดถึงภาพคร่าวๆก่อนเดี๋ยวครูจิ๊บจะให้ไปดูนะวิธีการทำงานคอสตูมดีไซน์ของละครของภาพยนตร์ต่างประเทศซึ่งก็น่าจะเป็นแบบที่สามารถทำให้เรานั้นยึดมาเป็นแบบในการทำงานได้ไปดูกันเลยจ้ะ
Antoinette, Elle Woods, Wonder Woman. Each of these leading ladies knows how to use fashion to make an impression. The actors, writers, and directors get some credit, but we can't forget about the incredible costume designers who use clothing to immerse us in spectacular cinematic worlds. Whether it's fantasy, recreating the past, or illustrating a character's distinct style, these wardrobe wizards use costumes to reflect a character's individuality and make
พูดถึงการทำงานว่าการออกแบบเสื้อผ้าเครื่องแต่งกายบางทีมันก็จะ reflect มันจะบ่งบอกถึงความเป็นตัวละครแล้วดูไปด้วยกัน
them relatable. The shape, color, and texture a designer chooses creates a bold visual statement and demonstrates everything from a character's personal growth to where the story might take us next. Let's explore some of the amazing costumes from our favorite films and discover how they contribute to such marvelous storytelling.
Now tell me, where did you get that beautiful cape?
Great movie costumes can make us feel like we're being transported into another reality. The present can be transformed into the past, the future,
Your jacket is now dry.
even an alternate universe. And there's no better place to start discussing the importance of wardrobe than with 1939's Gone with the Wind, which uses costume design to transport us to America in 1861. Costume designer Walter Plunkett not only created one of the most accurate costume portrayals of the South during the Civil War, but also used Scarlett O'Hara's wardrobe to demonstrate the restrictions and expectations of the time. When Mammy chid Scarlett for her dress, we immediately get the sense that she's someone who rises up against social restrictions. Her dress at the barbecue is different from those worn by the other women, with covered shoulders and chests. The green ribbon symbolizes one of Scarlett's flaws, envy, but her stubbornness also endears us towards her.
If I couldn't get a better bold net old maiden
น่า
reach.
ดู
In Titanic, the 1912
Titanic
fashion reflects the transition from traditional to modern styles. Costume designer
Titanic
Deborah
เป็นยุค
Lynn
ไหน
Scott won an Oscar for her work,
Titanic เป็นยุค
and one of her
Edward Dean
biggest
ช่วงสงครามโลก
accomplishments
ครั้งที่
was being
สอง
able to
นะ
realistically illustrate the differences between the first class and third class
ตอนนี้กระโปรงก็จะไม่
passengers.
บานแล้ว
When it
ก็จะ
came to
หุบ
Rose and her peers,
คือมันเปลี่ยนไป
there
ตาม
was a
แฟชั่น
focus on
นะ
lace and beading. For
คือ
the
เนื่องจาก
lower
ว่า
class
โอเค
passengers,
ต้องการความ
there
เรี
are
ยบง่าย
diverse
ต้องการ
immigrants
ความ
wearing
คล่องแคล่วคล่อง
clothing
ตัว
from
เพิ่มมาก
Irish,
ขึ้น
Italian, Eastern European, and
สังคมมันเป
Scandinavian
ลี่ยนไปการ
backgrounds.
แต่งกายก็เปลี่ยนไปด้วยนะลูก
Do you know about misery?
Accurately portraying culture is a challenge for designers, but making some creative tweaks to historical accuracy is not necessarily a bad thing. Memoirs of a Geisha is set in early 20th century Japan. Designer Colleen Atwood mixed modern silhouettes with her research on kimonos. While many point out that Atwood's kimonos are different from traditional
ถึงแม้ว่า
kimonos,
จะ
it's
อ้า
done
ง
on
อิงตามวั
purpose
ฒนธรรม
so they would be more
การแต่งกาย
impactful
ญี่
for
ปุ่น
the
แต่เขาก็จะ
film.
ใส่ดีไซน์
Who is responsible for this?
ลายเส้น
Many films use this technique of modernizing historical wardrobes so that today's audience can relate to a story and its characters. The costumes from 2013's The Great Gatsby aren't very historically accurate. For example, designer Catherine Martin decided not to flatten women's chests, which was popular in the 20s, but the modern elements she chose to include create a distinct tone, allowing us to see ourselves in these characters.
This is absolutely where you live, my dearest one.
Jacqueline Duran designed the costumes for 2019's Little Women and won an Oscar for her portrayal of popular 1860s fashion. But she still took liberties with the dresses the characters wore, skipping hoops and bodices so that the clothing was less restrictive in order to reflect the inner strength and independence of the women on the screen. Duran also designed the costumes for Atonement. Keira Knightley's green gown is iconic, but definitely shows more skin than was appropriate in 1935. Another of Duran's films, Anna Karenina, is set in the 1870s, but inspired by images from the 1850s. Duran wanted a balance of strict and romantic fashions, because that's what she felt better represented the character.
Well, how do I look?
Just as fashion reflects the time period of a film, it also sets the movie's tone and gives us a sense of what's to come. Milena Canonero designed the costumes for the Grand Budapest Hotel and used rich colors, mainly purple, red, pink, and yellow to create a fairy tale environment with uniforms far different from what you'd expect hotel staff to wear. Zero's bellhop uniform is a version of Gustav's concierge uniform, which immediately makes you connect them and prepares you for the way their fates intertwine throughout the movie. Canonero also perfectly captures Wes Anderson's distinct style, reflecting not only the characters in the film, but also the director.
You're now going to be
ก็จะมี
officially
นักวิชา
interviewed.
การออกมาวิจารณ์
Should I
นี่
go and
สำคัญ
light
นะ
the candle first, sir?
Sweeney Todd, on the other hand, creates a distinctly grim environment. You can only expect bad things to happen with the dark, drab, dirty, and gloomy fashions. And the pops of color actually seem unsettling. Like Wes Anderson's films, Tim Burton's films have a distinct style that ties together daring costumes and sets, creating his own version of the world. In addition to immersing us in a believable world, costumes have to create believable characters. In 500 Days of Summer, Tom wears warm, dark colors like brown, while Summer wears cooler colors like blue. This is made obvious right from the opening title. As the film progresses, their colors start to rub off on each other. Tom is surrounded by blue, and Summer starts wearing brown.
Sorry, I just left, can I, one second.
In Legally Blonde, Elle Woods' wardrobe constantly reflects her personality, even when her life is changing. Her fashion reflects different experiences, but it's distinctly her own sense of style. Fashion sets Elle apart from her fellow Harvard students, just as it sets Willy Wonka apart in the 1971 film. His jacket was not a popular style, making him seem ahead of his time. The color, hat, and bow tie are details that make him stand out from the crowd.
Joyed, enraptured, entranced. Are we ready? Yes. Good. In we go.
Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland uses unique fashion typical of a Burton film, but it's actually the subtle additions to Alice's wardrobe that best reflect her character. Costume designer Colleen Atwood used black decorations on Alice's youthful blue dress to show viewers that the character's not as childish as we might think. Since fashion can help us get to know a character, it also changes to reflect character development. In Marie Antoinette, designer Milena Canonero dresses Kirsten Dunst in youthful fashions at the beginning, but they become more sophisticated as the character matures. In Titanic, Rose is dressed in tight dresses that illustrate confinement, but near the end, she literally rips herself out of her restrictive wardrobe, and her dress becomes loose.
Oh, stop it, Mother. You'll give yourself a nosebleed. This is not a game.
Katie's style in Mean Girls changes as she swaps social circles. She begins by not knowing much about fashion, then she becomes a plastic. And finally, she finds a happy middle ground that is a reflection of her and not just the people she surrounds herself with.
You look awesome.
I know, right?
The fashion in a film can also demonstrate a character's extravagance or a film's distinctiveness. The Devil Wears Prada used very expensive fashion that would have cost over $1 million if they'd had to pay for it all. The fashion used is also timeless, which takes a keen eye and a sense for what will still be fashionable in the future.
And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact...
Clueless uses trendy outfits to capture the style of upper-class teenagers. Designer Mona May also did the costumes for Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, and both films have very distinct aesthetics that set the film apart and are still popular today.
Ew! Get off of me! Ugh, as if.
In Birds of Prey, there are no high-tech or expensive superhero costumes, but the costumes capture each of the characters' unique personalities with their strengths in mind, as well as makes it clear that these women aren't very experienced at saving anyone.
You okay? Yeah. He's gone.
Of course, capturing character becomes a lot trickier when movies are about real people, like Marie Antoinette. Sure, designers have actual images to look back on, but accuracy definitely faces more scrutiny. Julie Weiss designed the costumes for Frida based on real portraits. She also used traditional Oaxacan embroidered tops and colorful beaded jewelry that were purchased from actual Mexico City street merchants. For Jackie, the exact historical references worked out in their favor. Natalie Portman not only mastered Jackie's unique voice, but also rocked copies of actual outfits worn by the First Lady.
He had the most wonderful expression on his face. You know?
Some films, like Elizabeth, get a lot of criticism for the costumes not being accurate enough. But designer Alexandra Byrne did outdo herself by copying Elizabeth's exact coronation outfit from a portrait.
Queen of England, Ireland, and France.
World building relies heavily on costume design because no matter how good a set or story is, it's impossible for a fantasy to be believable if the characters look and dress exactly like us. In Lord of the Rings, over 19,000 costumes were made to create the characters of Middle-earth. All of the pieces were made by hand, and even the simplest mesh armor took 3 days to make. In Harry Potter, the school uniforms are an important part of how we view Hogwarts, and what makes it different from any other fancy boarding school. The wizarding world also has its own witchy style, but it's not so different that we have trouble believing that magical people coexist with muggles.
As the muggles say, truth will out. Yes?
It's one thing to design incredible animated wardrobes, but it's another to bring that magic to life. While it may seem like a lot of CGI goes into making the movies feel enchanted, most of the wardrobes from favorites like Beauty and the Beast and Into the Woods were made by hand. Cinderella's dress was made of 12 layers of different colored silk and tulle and 10,000 Swarovski crystals. It took Lily James 45 minutes to put it on. When it comes to creating science fiction or an apocalyptic universe, costume designers have to toe the line between relatable and believable styles and what they feel like the circumstances of the future will create. In Star Wars, there's a focus on Western and military clothing, and though it's not something any of us would wear every day, they're simplistic and familiar enough to be relatable.
With the blast shield down, I can't even see. How am I supposed to fight?
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
In Mad Max: Fury Road, extravagant clothing just wouldn't make much sense. The way a character is styled allows us into their headspace and tells us their role in society. The leaders wear more fabric, gear, and accessories, while most of the lower class, slaves, and fighters do not. Superhero films also take it upon themselves to create new worlds. To create the citizens of Wakanda, Black Panther's costume designer Ruth E. Carter studied photos of authentic African outfits and looked up examples of body piercing and body art. She mixed together futuristic elements with traditional African clothes and high-fashion accessories. Most of the costumes were created with hand painting and 3D printing. The costumes match the incredible city aesthetic that makes Wakanda look so unique.
I accept your challenge.
As CGI improves, costume designers are starting to use it to enhance costumes. In Guardians of the Galaxy, there is a mix of real actors plus CGI characters. Some of the costumes are computer designed, but there are still a lot of practical elements used. For example, no computer effects are used on Gamora, just makeup and prosthetics. Meanwhile, Captain Marvel's costume uses 3D elements and CGI to seem more powerful and dynamic. But designer Sonia Milkovic wanted Carol Danvers' look to embrace her gender without being objectifying. So there was still a lot of time spent building and creating believable costumes that weren't just digital. As for Wonder Woman, her costumes definitely needed the CGI treatment to look as fluid and functional as they do. But her look still represents older versions of her character. And Diana Prince wears a lot of other costumes with goddess-like elements that don't rely on CGI to make them cool. Which movies have your absolute favorite costumes? How do you think they contribute to the story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And hey, don't forget to hit that button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to our channel for more. Thanks for watching.
เอาล่ะทุกคนพอจะเห็นภาพเนาะ
หอมสดชื่นแบบมีคาริสมา
ต่างๆที่มีมากมายเลยทีเดียวเชียวนะครับทีนี้เรามาดูว่าเราจะมีวิธีอย่างไรนะฮะในการที่จะทำคอสตูมดีไซน์เนี่ยให้มันสร้างเหมือนเป็นลุคใหม่ๆเป็นลุคที่เป็นเหมือนไอคอนิกเป็นเหมือนเป็นเหมือนภาพจำนะฮะให้กับตัวละครหรือนะให้มันดูเป็นแบบเอกลักษณ์ของตัวละครนั้นเฉพาะนะไปดูกันนะฮะ
Epithelial cells, RPE.
The next thing that sometimes happens is an MRI.
We need to.
This video was brought to you by Bombfell. Head over to bombfell.com/filmradar to get $25 off of your first order. Behind every memorable character is a memorable costume, and behind every costume is a costume designer. Their job is to create a look for each character that serves the needs of the story, sometimes to make a character stand out from the crowd, sometimes to blend into one, but always to make sure that they're clothed in the appropriate attire.
That's the definition of good costuming, that it's the most appropriate. That's the most appropriate thing for the character to be wearing in any scene.
Deciding on what would make for the most appropriate outfit requires a deep understanding of character and story.
As a costume designer, sometimes we're more like psychologists, figuring out our characters, where they would shop, what kind of clothes they would wear, how messy or neat they were, where their station in life. And basically, we set the time and the place with our costumes.
The first step to designing a great costume is understanding the script. For each character to feel believable, you have to consider everything about that character when designing their wardrobe. Where they're from, their financial situation, how fashionably conscious they are, and not to mention the specific context of each scene. Princess Anne in Roman Holiday should be wearing something elegant while fulfilling her royal duties, and something rather dressed down while incognito in Rome.
This is what we call transformation through wardrobe. The main things that I want to be very sure and explain to you that fashion is not the primary thing, the primary effort in motion pictures is to tell the story.
A good costume designer knows how to analyze a screenplay much like an actor would, to get inside the head of the character, to develop an understanding of the world that that character belongs to, and to design the wardrobe accordingly. After a thorough reading of the script, the costume designer will begin conversations with the director. Each director will have their own unique vision for any given project, and it's that vision that every crew member on a film should be working towards.
It is a true collaboration in that we're all reading the same screenplay. And the screenplay has clues, but then you have to have the conversation with the director, and not just one. And a lot of conversation with the director because it's the director's movie, right? Maybe not at Marvel, but you know, it's the director's movie.
Those conversations are crucial to understanding what themes are going to be explored, the transformations a character may go through, and how the costume should reflect that. How color can be used to subtly imply a character's pride in their heritage and subsequent journey to a new country, or how it can show us that a character has fallen in love, or to show us that a character has fallen out of it. A costume can show us a character following in his father's footsteps, a character's descent into a criminal underworld where moral lines become increasingly blurred, or foreshadow a character's affinity for pretty things.
There is something about him that is slightly vain, that little neckerchief that he wears. So again, it comes back to starting to let the audience know beforehand that there is something about Smeagol that isn't as endearing as a hobbit.
There are endless possibilities for costume design to contribute to the storytelling, and that's something that the costume designer and the director will work closely together to achieve. Once the vision has been established, the costume designer will often enter the research phase, an essential part of the process that doesn't just apply to a period piece, but even something like fantasy or sci-fi, because more often than not, you're pulling from real-world examples to influence your design. But even a contemporary piece still necessitates research to understand the culture or economy of any given setting and the characters that exist within. Creative license is often taken, the level of which is ultimately up to each director and designer, but regardless of how much liberty is taken with the historical references, it's still important to have a base level understanding of the history governing the clothing so that the work feels grounded in reality. Nearly every design choice has a practical function underlying the aesthetic. Understanding why something is designed a certain way allows a designer to create a costume that feels convincing within its narrative. This of course involves further collaboration with other crew, such as the hair and makeup department or the production designer, to follow the same guidelines as far as color palette or tone to make sure that each costume can fall into place within the larger tapestry. Before any design is manufactured, it starts as a sketch. Not only does this allow for quick changes if a certain fabric or color isn't working with the rest of the crew's designs, but most importantly, it saves the entire production valuable time and money. It also gives the costume designer the opportunity to explore their best options based on things like budget, the specific actor, or a costume's functionality, say designing an outfit that can cover the stunt rigging for Neo in The Matrix. But whatever criteria may be influencing different design decisions, I think the most important thing to realize about costume design is that everything you see a character wearing, from the lead actors to the background extras, is designed.
Nothing is random. Everything in the frame is designed to tell one story.
The reason that everything is designed is because in film, everything matters.
With a camera, you can zoom in and get close to every single part of the human body, and you can tell if a shirt has been pressed or not pressed. You can tell if shoes are cared for or neglected. You know, all of these little things that help give the audience clues about who the character is.
Once sketches have been finalized, the crew will begin manufacturing the costumes. Sometimes things can be pulled from a shelf or rack, but the vast majority of costumes have to be manufactured to maintain continuity.
All of these clothes are manufactured. Okay, designed and manufactured. Why? Fight Club. So many fights, right?
You could not just buy a piece, you had to have
doubles, triples, quadruples, right?
This is the thing most people also don't realize, that the clothes don't deteriorate through the course of making a movie. Every scene in which they're deteriorated is a separate piece.
The scale of the production is entirely based on the size of the budget and what's needed for each film, but it's not unusual to have hundreds of people working on costumes for any given project. Expert tailors, cobblers, blacksmiths, tanners will all come together to craft the costumes that you see on screen. And for a film like Ben-Hur, that involved creating thousands of costumes that were all researched and designed for every single background actor, even if they only appear for a few frames. 2 crew members at Weta Workshop famously lost their fingerprints after making the chainmail for all of the different suits of armor required for the films, which had around 13,000 rings per suit. But it's that dedication to the craft, to getting every single detail right, that makes these movies great. Costumes help to tell us something about a character and the world they inhabit. They aid the actor in the transformation process and help them to deliver their best performance. They become important pieces of iconography surrounding any classic character whose outfit is often the most recognizable part about that character.
The costumes that stick in your mind are the ones that the character has inhabited and the character has really come alive in, and that's why you remember them. That's the goal, I think.
And just like a costume designer will create an iconic look to help tell a story, you too can tell your own story by how you choose to dress. But picking out clothes can be hard. Stores don't always have the right size or style that you're looking for, and it can be frustrating to spend hours looking only to walk away empty-handed. Most of you have probably already heard of Bombfell, but for the uninitiated, they're a website that pairs you with your own stylist to send you the right clothes every time. They work off of details like height, weight, body type, and style preferences to put together an outfit, send it right to your door, and from there you have a 7-day try-on period to decide what you would like to keep, and if there's anything that you would like to send back. But before they ever send you anything, they give you a preview of what you're about to receive, with 48 hours to communicate with your stylist about any potential changes you would like to make. So as long as you've provided the correct details and work intimately with your stylist, who you can message at any time with questions or concerns, sending anything back will be a rare occasion, which is not only great for your convenience, but the more you keep from every order without sending something back, the more money you save. I personally was sent 3 items in total, and I ended up keeping all 3 because I worked with my stylist, expressed concerns when I had them, and I had my order adjusted to fit my needs. Everything fit and looked great, and all in all, it was an incredibly easy experience that I would recommend to any guy out there struggling with his wardrobe. If you head over to bombfell.com/filmradar, you can try it out for yourself, and you'll even get $25 off of your first order. No matter your body type or what style you prefer, your stylist will work closely with you to make sure that you get something that you'll love. So again, that's bombfell.com/FILMRADAR to get $25 off of your first order.
โอเคเดี๋ยวเราจะมาทำโปรเจกต์นะแล้วก็นำเสนอกันว่าเราจะทำคอสตูม ละครเรื่องอะไรนะฮะแล้วก็นำเสนอมาทำเป็นกลุ่มรวมกันแล้วเดี๋ยวยังไงครูจิ๊บก็จะมาร่วมกับอาจารย์อีก2ท่านช่วยกันวิพากษ์นะฮะช่วยกันตัดสินช่วยกันแนะนำไว้ต่างๆนะฮะโอเคยังไงเดี๋ยวเรียบร้อยแล้วเราจะนัดหมายกันนำเสนอนะจ๊ะวันนี้เดี๋ยวเราพอแค่นี้กันก่อนเนาะ